Nobody has ever come forth to say, I wasn't able to vote because they said I'd voted already. So this time around, there were so many attempts to stop the election from happening through means which were not usual for the election being stopped. And the president of the NBA stood his ground. The ECMBA confirmed that it was ready to conduct the election. But my core contestants insisted that the means by which they had intended to conduct the election was not robust enough to withstand any rigging. And so they insisted that we should include the use of telephone numbers to pass the OTPs to voters, because the emails are subject to manipulation. And so by Wednesday last week, the ECMBA conceded to them and said, we'll use the telephones. They wanted the election to be postponed. And the ECMBA said they were happy to go on Saturday, they would be ready. If the ECMBA said they would be ready, then there was no reason for the elections to be postponed. And so the elections were not postponed. Now, unfortunately, the system came under tremendous attack, a cyber attack that was designed to ensure that it didn't work. Who did what? I have no idea, and I don't speculate. But the system was disabled. It took the mercy of God. It took a miracle for another server to be designed in order to, and that happened, I understand, within 3 hours. A completely different platform was built that had no time to be tested, that started running at 7:35 a.m.
You think there was a sabotage on the system?
Oh, yes, there was. That's the reason why the president of the NBA has come out publicly and said so. It was hacked, and there was nothing that the service providers didn't do to try and get it up and running. At the end of the day, they got the wisdom to build a fresh one. And what is unprecedented, they were able to build one within 3-4 hours. And that's what we started using at 7:35 a.m. Now, there were glitches here and there, but it largely withstood the pressure of so many lawyers trying to vote, and it lasted for the entire 24 hours.
Were you able to vote yourself?
Do you know, I actually voted. I actually pressed submit. It was when my co-opponent said that I wasn't able to vote that I realized, and I checked the voters list, I didn't find my name.
So out of the 12,000 votes that got in the election, yours wasn't there?
Apparently, because I actually voted, and luckily for me, I did it with people around me. Right. So I was surprised, and I'm hoping that perhaps the fact of getting an OTP and all that would have left a footprint.
You know, I had the former governor of Lagos here yesterday, and I asked him about this election. So I'm hoping that we can play that excerpt to hear his thought on electronic voting and what transpired within the NBA.
I tried to vote, and I think in the first attempt at the electronic thing a couple of years back, and it took hours and hours. At the end of the day, the process just became too difficult for me to engage with. Of course, I'm probably from the analog age. So I crave, and I'm sure younger lawyers will not like me saying this, but this is what I'm comfortable with. I crave back those days when we used to vote during the annual general conference. So everybody who comes to the conference is registered and we vote. But of course, there's nothing perfect about that. I'm the first to admit that one of those votes went south in the Port Harcourt conference. So there's nothing perfect. It's actually us at the end of the day. So whether you choose the electronic, whether you choose the manual, whether you choose the digital, whether you do real-time transmission, how do people behave? Where is the sense of sportsmanship and the spirit of concession to say, look, I think Nifemi won this election, let's move on?
Well, I didn't win the election, you did. But he's always been a proponent of there are no perfect elections anywhere.
Yes.
But perhaps NBA will now understand that electoral problem in Nigeria is not a politician thing. Maybe you will calm down now when criticizing government. Do you think there's a sense to which NBA now understands that this is perhaps a problem with the system and that all of us are Nigerians after all?
Well, first of all, I understand the arguments about not having the moral justification to criticize elections when we can't get our house in order. The issues are not exactly apples for apples, right? But I understand that the principle is the same. Nothing will take away our moral justification to be the watchdog of society, and we'll continue to improve on that. We will also continue to improve on our own internal systems. The idea is, once we have the determination to ensure that our systems work and are acceptable to the vast majority of our members, then we would have achieved success. That won't prevent us from criticizing elections. I told you earlier on that this was not foolproof, it was not flawless, right? But I think that when people say that the election was the worst that we've ever had, no, I completely disagree. We all know the reasons why the election went the way it did. And like I said, thankfully, the allegations of rigging are far less strident than the allegations of disenfranchisement, which affected all of us.
There are bigger allegations, and we're going to talk about that shortly. Okay. Let's take a short break and we'll be right back. Stay with us, everyone. Oyinkansola Badejo Okunsoya, President-elect Nigeria Bar Association, actually the first elected female president of the association. Thank you so much for staying the course of the program. Now let's talk about what some of your opponents are saying. They've gone even further. They've alleged that the process was manipulated in your favor and suggested the outgoing NBA president indeed influenced the electoral committee. There are serious allegations because they go directly to the legitimacy of your mandate. I'm wondering what you say to lawyers who believe you won, but not necessarily through a process that they can trust.
Okay, so the process that they say they cannot trust, my opponents are saying that it was rigged in my favor. And thankfully, right, this electoral process has come under the greatest scrutiny that any of our elections have come under since we started universal suffrage and electronic voting. So I think even the people that maintain that this election was rigged know very well that the level of scrutiny that this election came under would have been very difficult for anybody to rig, any one of the opponents to rig, if indeed that is a possibility. That's one. Secondly, right, what are the red flags that one notices when elections are purportedly being rigged? They didn't show up in this election. From the time that I led the election throughout consistently. There was never a time that I dropped down. There was never a time that any of my opponents passed me. I led consistently and the gap kept widening. 3, the votes were trickling in organically. There was no evidence of dumping, which is what they say happens when there's rigging going on. You didn't suddenly see 20, 30, 50 votes coming. They were trickling in organically. 4, this election was the most watched. We have a system that refreshes every 10 seconds. People were watching and reposting. It was clear that there was no rigging.
Did anyone in the NBA establishment help your campaign in ways your opponents didn't enjoy?
You know, several months ago, they accused the president of saying that he could not be neutral and that he had a candidate in the election. Those words were taken out of context, but I guess the meaning was clear. He said he was only entitled to 1 vote, and that 1 vote he would exercise, and that he wasn't supervising the ECNBA, which was an independent body, and that he didn't have any desire, intention, or ability to rig the elections in anyone's favor.
Well, is it true that you were his preferred candidate to succeed him?
As a matter of fact, he never told me that.